Hello and welcome to Helpful Spirits. Before starting this, I hope all of you have been well in my most recent absence, as I have missed making videos as well as interacting with all of you. I know you have heard this before, but trust me when I say this will return to normal shortly. Also, I want to note that if my voice sounds a little different, it is due to the fact I have been recovering from a bad sinus infection mixed with the flu this week. Anyway, onto our topic, which was suggested by one of my fans named Michael McAfee, I'm assuming. Anytime you look up anything about ghosts or haunted locations, the same general theme seems to follow each encounter. A spirit that is hell-bent on letting their presence be known by causing havoc, or even in some cases, reports mention that some ghosts even become violent. This situation is echoed in just about every show or movie representing them, excluding one famous friendly one. I'm not saying these reports are false, as there are plenty of malicious spirits who have different reasons for doing what they do. Some are confused as to what is going on, or don't seem to be aware that they are dead, while others just seem to enjoy being, dare I say, mischievous. What we almost never hear about are the reports of ghosts who are more benevolent with their intentions. With this video, I intend on shining a light on a few of these stories that entail spirits who want to help rather than harm the living world. Money. According to a vague story from an English newspaper in 1764, it tells a tale of a spirit that was concerned with a family's financial problems. Thomas Cornelius Nutt and his wife Anne lived in Uppingham and had a fairly large family. Thomas's 18-year-old daughter Anne suddenly started to receive visits from an unknown and sadly undescribed spirit. With the visits, the ghost told her of a buried treasure that was located somewhere under the floor of their house. Anne mentioned this to her father, who then went looking for any sign of anything buried. Unsuccessful, he gave up, but Anne did not, and after being directed towards a certain flagstone, she found a buried pot that held over 200 ancient post-Roman silver coins. Thomas immediately took the coins to London in order to sell them off. Now that is where the story ends, and as you may be thinking, this whole thing was so vague it couldn't be true. Oddly enough, this discovery was found to be mentioned in the British Numismatic Society in relation to located post-Roman coin hoards. In it, it mentions there was a lot of 200 silver coins that were recovered, and the location of the treasure was said to have come to Thomas's daughter in a dream. It goes on to mention that the coins were worth a lot of money. So at this point, there may be more to this story than what we may have first assumed. My own. I couldn't make a video about this topic without adding a few shortened versions of my own experiences. A few of them have been mentioned previously in my personal paranormal series, but why not mention them again for anyone who hasn't seen it? A few years ago, my grandmother on my father's side was on her deathbed in the hospital. It was a period where the entire family was just waiting to get the call, as nothing could be done to help her. Well, at one point she passed away, quite a heartbreaking event for me, which involved a final phone call with her in which she was basically comatose. Not long after this, I was downstairs around 3 o'clock in the morning watching some Netflix on our Xbox 360. Suddenly, the Xbox started messing up and scrolling through titles without me using the controller. I can't recall how it exactly happened, but I noticed the Kinect sensor, which has a screen showing on the TV that reacts to your movements, popped up, and I kept seeing something strange on it. On that screen, it showed me sitting on the couch, but there was another being showing up that was only a couple feet in front of me. This being was waving its hands either at me or the TV. Naturally, I started to ask it questions and realized that it appeared to be the spirit of my grandmother stopping in to say goodbye. At one point, after a final wave, she just disappeared, and I never had an issue using the Xbox again. This one may sound real strange, but it still haunts me to this day. When I was much younger, I stopped at one of my friend's houses, but he wasn't home. For some unknown reason, I decided I couldn't get my car out of the parking spot I was in, so I decided to walk to my other friend's house, which entailed a couple-mile hike down a back road. And it was getting dark out. About halfway through my trip, I was cresting the top of a blind turn on a steep hill, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something very familiar appear. It was the exact description of what the stereotypical Grim Reaper is commonly depicted to look like. Even when I fully faced it, there was no denying what it was. Out of shock of seeing something suddenly appear, not to mention the Grim Reaper, I literally jumped back just in time for a car to come racing around a turn without headlights on. It came so close to hitting me, I could feel the air rushing by it. As it turns out, had I not jumped back, I probably wouldn't be here relaying this story. For the longest time it confused me as to why the Grim Reaper, the farrier of souls, would save me. That normally doesn't seem to be its deal, and might be considered bad for business. It wasn't until much later that I realized it might not have been the Grim Reaper at all, but some sort of helpful spirit utilizing that image as a way to shock me into moving. Even after all these years, that story still gives me cold shivers. Gray Man of South Carolina. In South Carolina, legends and sightings have continued about a spirit that is simply known as the Gray Man. While the name may put off an air of being spooky when considering how many bad stories there are of shadow people or the more infamous Lady in White, this spirit seems to only want to help and save people. The Gray Man's backstory is well debated, but most agree that in life he was a young sailor who was returning to South Carolina to be with his lover on Pawleys Island. During his trip home, he got caught in quicksand and died. Some say the man's name was Percival Pawley or Plowden Charles Jenneret Weston, and some have even claimed that he was the famous pirate Blackbeard, but that seems unlikely. There are other stories that claim that he was never human at all, but is rather a spirit of nature. Regardless of who he was, or should I say, what he was, his intentions stay the same. Claims state that since 1822, he has been seen walking along the beaches as almost an omen of an impending disaster. While no one has physically talked to him, those that do report encounters claim that they find their homes in perfect shape even when all else around them are destroyed, as if the Gray Man is protecting it. Most people describe him as wearing gray clothing and a long coat, but more often than not, he vanishes from sight if approached. What makes this story fantastic is that there have been so many reported sightings, and I'm even including an image from the recent Hurricane Florence, where some claim it depicts the Gray Man walking the pier. On a side note, some have claimed that the spirit chooses one house as a way to show he is still protecting his lover's home, even if he knows it isn't the same house. Martha the Nurse. Ruby was a young LPN working night shift at a hospital where she suddenly came under the full workload of a full ICU. Ruby was fresh at her job and fairly inexperienced, but due to the night nurse calling off, she was alone with her daunting duty. As the night wore on, she gained more and more patients to keep track of and started to fall behind on her hourly checks on each patient. Inexplicably, an older woman dressed in an outdated nurse uniform came up to her and said that the patient in room 8 needed to be checked on. Assuming the new woman was sent to help her, she went to room 8, where she found a patient had climbed out of bed and got tangled in the bed sheets. After fixing the issue, Ruby went about her night, and again the old nurse came up to her telling she needed to check room 6. This time the patient in the room was having respiratory failure, and again the situation was rectified. As the night wore on, she would visit patients' rooms only to be told that she had just missed the other nurse, or that they had just been checked on by an older nurse a few minutes ago. At one point, Ruby caught sight of the older nurse entering a patient's room at the end of the hall, and she quickly ran to the doorway in order to thank the woman for helping her. Strangely, as she entered the room, she found the patient was soundly sleeping, and no other soul was inside. Ruby made it through her shift without further incident, and didn't return to night shift again until around Christmas time. This time the head nurse pulled Ruby aside and mentioned something about Martha helping her out on a previous night shift. Mystified, she asked who Martha was, and the head nurse pulled out an old picture showing the same old nurse. She said that Martha had been her mentor. She was totally devoted to her work, but sadly had died in the office 30 years ago. The head nurse claimed that she had heard reports from other staff of her returning to help anyone who was in need. After that moment, Ruby saw Martha only one more time to tell her of a patient who was dying. This time, Ruby quickly followed her, only to see her vanish from sight the moment she rounded the doorway. Now, I absolutely love this story as it shows this spirit's devotion to helping others. I also realize that it does fall victim to a few tropes that worry me about being real. But I would like to note that the inspiration behind this story came from a nursing website, not about ghost topics, and everything seems to match up. This could just be a nice story, but I have heard so many similar events retold personally to me from others in the medical profession. For posterity, I will actually leave a link to the site in the description, as I left a lot of information out for the sake of time. Cold Ashton Butler. Our final story is one that I thoroughly enjoyed about a helpful butler. Near Bath, England, in South Gloucestershire, is a small village by the name of Cold Ashton. In 1564, the mayor of Bristol acquired the entire village and started construction on many beautiful buildings. The name of the mayor is unimportant, but many claim it was William Pepwall, while historians say it was probably more likely to have been John Gunning. With the construction came the building of our story, named the Elizabethan Manor House. The impressive house sits behind a hedgerow fence, with a large wrought iron, wood, and stone gate, styled with Renaissance architecture, blocking off all foot traffic. According to the legends, around the 1930s, a woman by the name of Lady Winifred Pennoyer had become lost while traveling the road one night. She stopped by the manor house, opened the front gate, and approached the door of the house. After ringing the bell a few times, the front door opened to a cheerful-looking butler who asked what she needed. After explaining her plight, he gave her directions to her destination, and as payment for his service, she gave him half a crown. After parting her company with the butler, she found her way to where she was trying to get to in the first place. The next morning, she told friends about the event of the previous night. Recognizing the description of the residence, her friend drove her to the house, but now it looked totally different. The gate was now firmly chained shut, and it was fairly obvious that the house had not been occupied for quite some time. Oddly enough, on further inspection, the half-crown that she had paid the butler with was laying on the ground. I know many of you may be thinking the same thing that I was thinking, that this could easily be just an urban legend, or at the very least, a coincidence. Such as someone squatting at the house when she visited, and they chained the fence shut after a strange person barged their way in. This could be possible, if there weren't many more reports afterwards with people claiming the same encounter occurring. Then again, you may never know. There were quite a few more stories about helpful ghosts that I couldn't include due to my time being limited as of late, but I highly suggest you look into this topic yourself if you have the time. As odd as it may seem, England has a huge number of helpful ghosts and spirit sightings, including a supposed fairy in the village of Croston in Lancashire named Shrewfoot. This being is said to have been sighted over 44 times. So at this point, do you have any ghostly encounters of friendly spirits to relay? Let me know in the comments below, or if you don't want to share with the public, you can always send me an email or contact me via my many social media accounts. I quickly want to mention that, as many of you are aware, I have worked with a clothing company recently by the name of Into the AM. They frequently send me emails about promotions, and recently they sent me one about a creator contest, where by clicking on my link, they tally up all sales, and even just views on their page, and by the end of October, they were going to find one winner to get a $250 store credit. I know money can be tight, so I'm happy that they include you viewing the items as well, without having to buy something. They have multiple items related to the paranormal, space, and have even started branching out into some video game clothing. I would greatly appreciate it if you could help me out with this, and as usual, if you do want to buy something, you can use my code ICEWolfVideos in all caps and one word at the checkout, and it will save you 10%, and I also get a small commission as well. Again, just using my link that I will post in the description still would help me out. As a quick update, I wanted to let you know that after posting my last video, my work schedule changed once again to where I now work 6 days a week for 11 hours a day. This is why my videos have, once again, became so unpredictable for an upload schedule. At this point, the most I can say is I have at least 8 weeks left on my current job outage, and after that, I plan on taking the winter months off. What this means for my channel is that within the next 8 weeks, uploads will be hard to keep regular, but after that, things will return to the normal once a week that I used to do. All I ask is that you stay patient with me and know that I'm trying my best to keep new content coming to you. If you haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to my channel for similar content to this, and also I'd greatly appreciate it if you could share my videos with someone you know who may be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!